race for the South Carolina Republican Party chairman is heating up between Lin Wood and current chairman Drew McKissick. I talk one-on-one with Drew for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Drew McKissick, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Man, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. And I want to go back to a couple of weeks ago when you wrote a letter to obviously the members of the South Carolina, Republican Party a couple of weeks ago. You said this quote, "Fellow Republicans, I'm writing to officially announce that I'm running for re-election at our upcoming state convention." Well, let me ask you this, Drew. From the time that you wrote that letter to right now, who is Drew McKissick?
Who is Drew McKissick? Well, that sounds like an existential question there. That's a little bit, I don't know if I've got enough time to answer. Look, I mean, I'm someone who got involved in the party about 32 years ago, actually, from my time there at the College of Charleston, and then going forward. Since then, I got involved in college Republicans, young Republicans, and with the party. I've worked with grassroots political groups. I've worked with lobbying campaigns. I've worked with candidates as a campaign manager, as a consultant. Then with the party, then with the campaigns again, then back with the party again, and then with the campaigns again. Kind of, in one, sometimes having one foot, outside the building, throwing rocks at the building, if you will, and then sometimes being in the building, catching the rocks. So you kind of sometimes see the problem from both sides, if you will. One thing that's always been heavy on my mind has been apathy. Apathy on the part of other, particularly fellow conservatives. How can I get them involved in the party, in the political process? How can I help educate them to actually have an impact on the things that they care about? And that's the thing that I pretty much tried to focus on for all these years that I've been involved.
From 32 years ago to right now, what is the biggest difference about politics?
Biggest difference about politics itself, I would say that it is more vitriolic than it used to be. And I think I would have to attribute that to the things that we argue over now politically are of a more fundamental nature than they used to be 20 or 30 years ago. I think most of our, political debates and fights, if you will, years ago were more at the margins, whether it was arguing about, the ideal marginal tax rate or, how to go about fixing roads or so forth. But now, the things that we argue over seem to be more fundamental in nature, fundamental to our country, our country's founding, fundamental constitutional values and principles and so forth. And I think, the more fundamental that the debate has become, or the issues at the root of the debate have become, the more vitriolic our politics has become as a result.
Where is your energy for all of this?
Where is my energy? I try to find it every day in a cup of coffee. But to me, it's a matter of being passionate about what you believe, and if you're passionate about what you believe, that drives your activity, gets you involved in the process. Again, when I got involved years ago, I quickly found out that I could not be what we would normally consider politically a single issue person, because there were so many different issues, quite frankly, that motivated me that I would just be schizophrenic real quick. I couldn't focus on everything at one time. I would have a political version of ADD, if you will. So I decided I would focus on the party and candidates, and helping to elect candidates and promote principles that, quite frankly, would have an impact on all of those things that, that I'm passionate about.
What is the political process right now?
Yeah. Well, the political process right now is essentially what it has always been. It is about whether or not people actually get engaged and involved. I tell folks all the time, politics is going to go on whether we're involved in it or not, because by nature it has to. We have a government. Government has to be staffed. Those people are going to implement policies, and they're going to do it whether you show up or not. And if you don't show up, then the odds that someone who doesn't believe what you believe takes your spot is pretty much guaranteed to mean you're going to be unhappy with the result if you don't actually get involved. So, our job as a party to begin with, the party's purpose is to actually come together around a common set of beliefs and principles, and then, actually promote candidates who will carry those beliefs and principles into government and into policy. But the party is not everything. There are plenty of other outside organizations that focus exclusively on policy, that do grassroots lobbying. I've worked myself with many of those groups in the past on the conservative side. So you have a lot of different jobs and things that need to be done, and different people with personalities who do them are more suited to do one versus the other. From my standpoint here in the party, and I see myself more as a mechanic. It's about actually putting together the political machinery that's necessary to actually identify and turn out votes and win elections. And that's what I focus on.
What are you identifying right now?
What am I identifying? In terms of what, people or issues, or what do you mean?
Oh, yes, identifying people, as you just mentioned. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, people, in my experience, are more likely to get involved on the basis of issues. Lee Atwater, who was a former political strategist from here in South Carolina, chairman of the Republican National Committee, who I was able to, have good conversations with actually when I was in college, and actually would pick him up and drive him to events and so forth when he would come to South Carolina. And we were able to talk a good bit. And one of the things that I always heard him say over and over again, and I actually have a sign here in my office with this quote on it, says, "Issues win campaigns." Issues motivate people. People will do things because of issues. They get passionate about issues quicker than they do about an individual. Issues can motivate people to work on a campaign or for a candidate. Issues can motivate people to give money to a cause. So what are we doing to actually find issues that people care about on a daily basis, issues that are more likely to attract other folks who would agree with our party, or who would agree with particular campaigns that we may be working on. Those issues may change on a day-to-day basis, or definitely with campaign seasons, because sometimes they're driven by events. The thing that you care about the most may have more to do with the last tax bill you got, or it might have something to do with, the pothole that you ran over on the way to work, or maybe it's, social issues, Second Amendment related legislation, whatever it may be. Those issues sometimes tend to change with each political cycle, or go up or down in terms of priority generally. But our job is to find those issues that will bring people to the table and get them involved with what we're doing.
I'm going to talk about that in more in depth in just a minute. But you also said this in the letter, quote, "It has been one of the greatest honors of my life to have the opportunity to serve as your state chairman these last 4 years." Then what is your definition of being a comprehensive conservative?
So, that's a label that I sort of created on my own, if you will, because, we see so many labels now in politics, obviously, and you've seen them. Some people have been branded as social conservatives, cultural conservatives. Well, these people over here are just fiscal conservatives, or, constitutional conservative. I mean, it kind of goes all across the board. And, I guess it's sort of my way of just trying to reject any of those one labels, because just because you are fiscally conservative and consider yourself a fiscal conservative doesn't also mean, or can also mean, that you're not also a social conservative, or cultural conservative, whatever it may be. And so my point is, in terms of the whole spectrum, that of conservatism, if you will. That's where our greatest success is going to be as a party. That's where I find myself, whatever the issue, whatever the subset of issues, I come down on the conservative side. And I think that's what we're looking for, people who would consider themselves to be comprehensively conservative on whatever the issues may be. And that's been where our greatest success has been as a party, as we've gone forward here in South Carolina, particularly in the last, say, 20 years. We've gone from being a decidedly minority party to a party with an almost supermajority in our legislature now, and having every statewide elected office, all but one congressional seat. That is attributable to our issues, our platform, the message that we put out to voters in South Carolina, because South Carolina is a conservative state.
And you said this too, quote, it has given me the chance to have an impact on the issues that we care about as conservatives, and I greatly appreciate it. What are those issues that conservatives care and appreciate right now?
Well, most recently, right now, you could look at the way things have gone in this session in the legislature, for instance. Because of our victories in the 2020 election cycle, increasing our majority in the state house, increasing our majority in the state senate, particularly the state senate, because we added 3 Republicans to the Senate majority. 26 is the magic number that you need to overcome a filibuster. And because of that, we were able to move forward on a piece of legislation that was near and dear to a lot of conservatives all across the state that we've been working to promote for the last several years. And that was the heartbeat bill. And the Senate made that Senate bill number 1. They pushed it forward as quick as they could. They got it out of the Senate. We got it through the House. Governor McMaster signed it into law. And that's an issue that, again, conservatives have been working for a long time on here in South Carolina. And because of their work at the grassroots and helping us turn out fellow conservatives to the ballot box in November, that bore fruit. Here in the last, several weeks, you've seen passage in the House of several pieces of Second Amendment related legislation, one of which just passed the state Senate earlier this week, the open carry bill, which will be going to Governor McMaster for his signature. Also, as I understand it, yesterday, the state house passed some important school choice related legislation. Again, something that's very near and dear to the hearts of conservatives around the state. Ronald Reagan used to say that personnel is policy. The type of people that we elect are going to impact the type of policies that we have, no matter what we may say our platform is, but if we don't elect the right people, we're going to have problems. And so that means elections matter. And being involved in the party matters. And conservatives across the state have put a lot of time and energy into the party and into our elections, and that bore fruit this past November, and now that is impacting policies that they care about.
And you also said this too, quote, over the last 4 years, we've seen our party grow in places it didn't exist and win in places we've never won.
Absolutely.
Where exactly did you grow?
Well, other than all over the state, well, a couple things. One, in terms of the party organization process. So, when you have your precinct meetings and your county convention and so forth, well, there's a finite number of people who actually turn up. They turn out and show up. You can't have an organization without people. You can't have campaigns without people. You got to get people together and get them involved. And so statewide, in this reorganization cycle over the last couple of months, we have increased the turnout over 2019 levels by 100% statewide. 100% growth all around the state within the last 2 years. Particularly, though, I would look at places like the PD. We've had great growth in, Marion County, Marlborough County, Dillon County, Hampton County, Jasper County, McCormick County, Saluda County, places like that where, and a couple of which, 3 counties of which, we did not have a party organization at all over 2 years ago, as recently as 2 years ago. We now have county party officers and a thriving group of grassroots activists there. Hampton County, for instance, we had no party there 2 years ago. We had almost 60 people turn out to organize a Republican Party in Hampton County 2 months ago. Have a county party chairman there now, an organization. In Marlborough County, same thing. 3 years ago, we didn't even have a county party chairman, and we had about 70 some odd people turn out there in the 19 cycle, and again this past time. That growth has happened in places where we didn't even have a party at all within the last couple of years.
Now, obviously, you want to win across South Carolina next time, but what places do you want to win next?
What places do we want to win next? Well, that may have a little bit to do with how they end up redrawing district lines later this year. So once we see what the map looks like and where our opportunities are, quite frankly, there are some districts that we would look at right now and think that, these are potentially winnable, but, you can't know whether or not you'll target them necessarily until the final lines come out. And, then you make your judgments accordingly on where you're going to put your resources. Because, politics, just like anything else, you've got a finite number of resources in terms of money, volunteers and time. And you're going to put those in the places where they can have the most impact. And, so we'll really have to wait until all the maps get redrawn later this year before we make those decisions.
And you also said this too, quote, we delivered the most ever from South Carolina for a presidential candidate, and in our growing state House and state Senate majorities that you just mentioned, picking up 5 sheriff seats and winning 34 out of 46 counties.
Yep.
We've elected the most Republicans in over 140 years. What would that majority be in the next 4 years?
Well, I think it'll be bigger. I mean, again, it's hard to say exactly what that majority would be. But again, a lot of it's going to come down to what the district lines look like and where our opportunities are. But again, we're coming up now on what we call an off-year cycle. It's a gubernatorial cycle. There won't be a presidential race, so we'll have all of the statewide constitutional offices will be up. In addition to Tim Scott, will be on the ballot. So those races are going to drive what we're looking at across the state, and they will impact the way turnout is in various areas versus a presidential cycle. Turnout will probably drop by about a third versus a presidential cycle statewide. But there are, in this particular cycle, though, you have more local offices coming up on the ballot, more what we would call courthouse races, sheriff's races, clerks of court, and things of that nature that come up in an off-year cycle. And, particularly going back and looking at a lot of those counties that I just mentioned a minute ago, where we had previously not been competitive, and now we actually have organizations in place, one of which, for instance, Chesterfield County is a perfect example. We just won a clerk of courts race in Chesterfield County. First time we won countywide there since the end of the Civil War. So there are opportunities like that for us in areas like that all around the state.
And you said this too. Most incredibly, we beat Democrats on straight ticket voting by amazing 17 points, proving to help our down ballot candidates, and proving that more people drawn to our party by the President Trump now considering themselves Republicans. How many people were drawn to the party in 2019?
Yeah. So you mean in 2020?
Well, you can talk to it. Yes, sir.
Right. Well, so I mean, I go back when I look at the straight ticket number. I go back about 3 election cycles. So 2016 was actually the first time that Republicans ever beat Democrats on straight ticket voting in South Carolina. We beat them by 2.5 points in 2016. And in 18, we beat them by 8 points statewide. And then, of course, in 2020, as you just mentioned, we beat them by 17 points statewide. To me, that is an indication of more and more of the people who have begun to come into the party over the last 4 years begin to think of themselves as Republicans. There are a lot of them were, say, conservative Democrats, maybe they were independents, whatever they were. Previously, they had tended to split their ticket more often. Maybe they were voting Republican for president and Congress and voting Democrat in local races, maybe because they knew the local councilman or sheriff or whatever, or they went to church with their family member or something like that. But now those ties are kind of beginning to break a little bit, and they're sticking with the party, voting a straight ticket. More of them are thinking of themselves as Republicans. And the benefit then that gives our down ticket candidates is, particularly because, down ticket races many times are just forgotten. They have a harder time raising the money, a harder time putting the campaign infrastructure together and the volunteers that they need, versus the campaigns that tend to get most of the media attention. That straight ticket support gives an incredible advantage to our down ticket candidates because essentially they can get the Republican nomination and then they can ride the ticket. And many of them did that across the finish line and actually were able to win last year in incredible numbers.
Now, what are the unique challenges and opportunities for the state GOP?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, we've got all kind of challenges all the time. Anytime you're trying to run a statewide political organization, you've got, to me, it really comes down to 3 fundamentals for any political organization, whether it's a party, whether it's a school board race, or whether it's a presidential race. There are really only 3 fundamentals to politics. I put it this way. Julius Caesar said about 2,000 years ago, if he had enough men and money, he could conquer the world. Well, men, if you think about that in terms of manpower, that's your organization. Money, he's got to be able to pay the manpower. But if you would add message to that list, what you say, what you believe, what you say about what you believe, and how you communicate it in a way to get people to agree with you, to agree with your candidates, those are the 3 fundamentals of any political organization. You have your manpower, you have your message, and then the money to get the manpower and the message out there. If you are focusing on something else that is not on that list, one of those 3 things, then in my opinion, you are probably doing somebody else's job. You're not doing your job. Political parties and their activity revolve around those three things. And if you focus on them, you can be successful. So to me, that's always a daily challenge. Sometimes there are new tools and techniques to do one of those three things, but it always comes down to those three things. What are you doing to help grow your manpower? As I pointed out in this last 2-year cycle, we've just grown our manpower 100%. What are we doing to raise more money, to actually do the things we need to do and build the infrastructure we need? And then how are we getting our message out there and in a way that's going to be successful? That is always our challenge on a daily basis.
How do you actually communicate your message and get people to actually agree with you?
Well, that varies from campaign to campaign, but you use all the tools and techniques that are out there, whether it's the media, whether it's traditional media, whether it's new media, social media, email, building your email list, and whether it's, again, campaign communications, radio, et cetera. I mean, you utilize everything in the toolbox, and you target it based on where it can be the most successful with the particular groups that you're trying to target.
And let me just ask a redundant question. How do you recruit and train candidates that reflect the value of the party?
Well, recruitment is something that particularly we focus on in off-year cycles, and training is something you focus on in off-year cycles. So once, we're past the state convention this coming weekend, we'll be moving forward for the rest of this year with a focus on training specifically, in training meetings all around the state, bringing in outside experts that our grassroots activists can come and sit and hear, whether it's learning how to be a better organizer, learning how to maybe run for a school board race, or how to help someone who's going to run for a school board race. Off years are when you want to focus on training and get folks engaged.
And how do you manage politics with people?
How do you manage politics? Well, I mean, that's an ongoing process. Look, you're always trying to help people be successful with what they care about. And if we're successful in showing them that our party is relevant to what they care about, then they're going to stay involved and be engaged.
What will be your external strategy, Drew?
Our external strategy. Well, I mean, we're focusing all the time on trying to draw in new people. Again, everything that we do is oriented around one of those fundamentals. We're trying to raise money, we're trying to organize people, or we're trying to get our message out. Again, if we do something else, we're doing somebody else's job.
And what will you consider to be an external strategy? Internal strategy. What would you consider to be an internal strategy?
And the internal strategy, well, that's dealing with staff primarily. We organize our staff in such a way. If you had a good organizational structure in place, then the rest of things tend to take care of themselves. So again, it's having the right staff in place to focus on those three fundamentals.
Where would you expand the party's membership in South Carolina?
Everywhere we possibly can.
I knew you were going to say that. How many members did you actually recruit in 2020?
Let's see. We had a little over 6,000 activists that we recruited in the campaign in 2020 statewide. And then we've worked to draw those people actually into the party structure here in this last reorganization process.
And what were your fundraising numbers in 2020?
Well, I don't let out all the fundraising information. You'll have to go online and check that out. Some of it's public, some of it's not.
Where in South Carolina did you gain the most membership?
It was all over the state, but the most impressive, though, again, was in those rural areas that I talked about earlier.
How many members did you actually lose?
Oh, I have no idea. We don't keep track of who we lose. We keep track of who comes on board.
How much money would you raise for the regular operations budget?
I mean, it varies from cycle to cycle, but again, we don't put all our financial information out there.
How much money would you produce for the surplus in that regular operations budget?
Well, again, we don't put that financial information out there, man.
What will be your fundraising goal for the party over the next 5 years?
Well, to raise more money than the Democrats.
Yes, sir. And let me ask you, what do you think will be the purpose of the SCGOP in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, our purpose is always to make our party relevant to the things that our base grassroots activists care about. The more successful we are in being relevant to them and what they care about, the more successful our party will be.
How do you retain the party's loyalty?
What's that?
How do you retain the party's loyalty?
Again, by being relevant to what they care about. If they actually believe that it matters to be involved, then they'll actually stay involved.
And let me return to the election that's going on between you and obviously Lin Wood, who's from Georgia. Will you release delegates lists to the other candidates?
So all candidates are being made or having a process made available where the party itself will send communications out on their behalf to all of the delegates and alternates around the state. So that keeps the party's list secure, but at the same time allows all candidates to be able to communicate with those delegates. Everybody's received an email on how to do that and have sent their information in.
And turning to Saturday, why will paper ballots be used?
Why?
Yes, sir.
Because they wanted to make the elections as transparent as possible. So we'll use paper ballots so they can count them in front of everybody, and they can then report their totals.
And how transparent will the next election be? How do you stop election fraud?
Were you talking about in statewide elections?
Yes, sir.
General elections? Number one, by having good poll managers and good poll watchers. That's critical. And also by making sure that voter rolls are kept up to date in county election offices so that there's less opportunity for fraud.
And how does that voter roll look right now?
It depends on which county you're talking about.
Okay.
Each county, deals with purging voter rolls according to their own timeline and so forth. We hope there'll be more standardization with that coming forward in the future. But that's, typically a county election office driven process.
Drew McKissick, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Take care.
Likewise. Yeah.